Hello and welcome back to my podcast, The Five W's and Age of Doing a PhD. My name is Dr. Nobulali Dangazele, and this episode will be focusing on how to do your PhD. So, I did my PhD in a rather unconventional manner from a practice perspective. And what I mean by this is, um, it took me a lot longer than what I had anticipated to do the PhD. Typically, how you do a PhD in the United Kingdom is through a 3 to 4 year track. And what that entails is the first year of the PhD is dedicated to doing your MPhil equivalent. And this means that you do coursework, and the coursework would accumulate and enable you to do qualitative and quantitative research methods, as well as selecting two master's level or MBA level, especially at a business school, modules that help you understand the area of the area of study that you want to focus on. So, in my first year of my PhD, I was put together with a class of fellow doctoral researchers, and we basically did qualitative research, quantitative research, and then I focused on the strategy track because I wanted to do my PhD topic in strategy. But I also took a leadership module titled Leadership and the Art of Judgment, because I knew that I wanted to work with senior management teams, and just being in a classroom with senior managers doing their MBAs would give me an opportunity to understand the challenges that face them. In addition to this, I took on extracurricular courses outside of the business school. I did some modules with the drama department. We had, visit as they were doing modules, and I also joined the thesis writing group or thesis writing program, I'll call it that, where you apply by writing, by sending in a sample of your writing and writing a motivation letter to a program that is university wide, basically saying why you believe that you are worthy of being on the thesis writing program and how doing that will help you with your PhD. So during the course of my PhD from second year onwards, I would attend these sessions every Thursday, and we'd basically come into the library or the space that had been booked by the program and talk about what we're doing in our thesis, and then have an opportunity to have friendly readers in the group, but also then sit down and actually write your thesis, or a part of the thesis during this time together. So the first year of my PhD was then dedicated to doing the coursework. And I must say it was a soft landing to getting back to doing the PhD, because I hadn't studied I hadn't studied since 2000. Okay, let me give years. I hadn't studied almost, in almost 7 years ish. I hadn't done a formal course. So I think going to class, getting assignments, writing essays was a good way of getting us to, oh, yes. Okay, another module we did was research methods. So we did quantitative and qualitative research methods. And then within that, there were different modules. Like I had to do statistics. In the one, I had to do like interviews, video ethnography, organizational studies. So there were a cluster of different modules that we do each term, but I think we did like 4 modules each term, according to the different tracks, which then collectively accumulated to a master's equivalent. And then the ending of how we do the first year is that you have to have a refined research proposal, because to get into the program, I had to write a 5,000 word research proposal. And now there's also like a panel interview, whereas there wasn't one in my times, not in my department anyway, or in my group. The department had different entry approaches. So that was the 1 year. And then in the end of that year, you have to do what is known as an upgrade. And what the upgrade is you present what research you intend to do, how you want to do it, the timelines where you want to collect the data, whether or not you've already got permission for that. And then the panel decides, okay, we think that you can go ahead and start the PhD, or we don't think you can go ahead and start the PhD. Fortunately, I passed mine the first time, and then immediately after you pass that, you can basically start collecting your data, and it's almost as if you're on your own. So first year, you do all these modules, and then from second year up until your final year, you're only asked to select 2 modules each year that you do, and this is at no extra fee. It's part of your school fees, and basically each year I chose 2 modules that would enhance to my PhD, as well as my scholarship. And you attend them, you do marks, but then you don't get penalized if you don't pass. But fortunately, I passed all of mine, including statistics. Fun times. So that was the first year. Then what happened in the second year is I started collecting my data very quickly in the journey. I was fortunate because the organization where I was going to be doing my study accepted my proposal rather early on, and allowed me to start collecting data as soon as my proposal was approved. So I was ahead of the curve when it comes to collecting data. And what do I mean by like collecting data? So I'm a qualitative researcher, and I was using ethnography as my primary way of understanding my research participants. So that meant that I had to go and spend a year in the organization of interest, on my research site. Some of my friends spent a year on a boat, well, not a full year, but like 3 months spread over the period of a year. And basically, the approach is for you to be immersed in the world of the people that you're studying, understand what it is that they do, and then look at a particular research question that helps you understand, Wuti, how does what they do inform theory? And how does that inform practice? Because I'm a practice scholar as well. So that's like the one aspect. So I went back to South Africa in March 2000 and, so 2015, October 2014 up until about March 2000 and, yeah. And okay, October 2000, our year starts in October. Our year starts in October. So from October till October 2014 to 2015, I had to do my coursework. Then October 2015 till March 2016, I was doing my upgrade. Then from March 2016, I started collecting my data. And the plan was to do March up until March and then do my data analysis. So I went according to that. I collected a majority of my data from March 2016 all the way up until November 2016. And I actually had more than enough data to call it like a PhD, you know. I was video recording my participants. So how I went about doing it was I went into the organization, conducted a session of interviews, as well as observing their meetings, looked at all of that data. Then I was like, okay, this is the area that I want to focus on. These are the participants that I want to focus on. And this is the research question that I think is going to be the most refined. So that was another aspect of it. Then the second phase of my data collection, I requested if I may video record the meetings, because when I did my first phase, I realized that there's a lot of stuff that I'm missing by just taking notes. I needed to understand, Wuti, what are the nuanced things that they're doing? Because my 3 constructs were discursivity, which is what people say, materiality, which is what the things that people use, and embodiment, which is what people do. So for me to capture all of that, being a solo observer wasn't working, and I needed to video record. And this was part of my proposal, but also ways of getting entry into an organization is not coming in with the video from the first day, but building trust, building rapport, also seeing where you can place the camera, which angles work. So every time I'd go into a meeting, I'd sit in a different place, notice what I can and can't capture, so that when my cameras come into the space, I know, okay, I need to place my cameras over there, I need to place my cameras over there, so that I can capture most of the work. And basically, it would be like 3 of me in the room, because I have 2 cameras and myself, and I take copious notes whilst doing that. So I went back to South Africa for this first phase. Second phase, in so I went from March and stayed till about April, May, then went back June, July, stayed until about August, then went back September, October, stayed until about November-ish. on and off. And each time they were doing away strategy meetings, they were doing leadership conferences, and I was just participating. So it's almost as if you become a working member of that organization, but not fully, because you're still observing. So how I did this is they gave me a beautiful office on the 27th floor. I got to dress all corporatey. In my head, I was like in suits. No, the office is a bad example. But yeah, you become a participant that works in the environment, lives with the people. So when they'd go to lunch, I'd go to lunch with them. But I'd ask questions during lunch. I'd also conduct interviews based on like, okay, this is what I heard during lunch. I'd also keep a voice recording of my thoughts. And if I was in meetings, I'd audio record the meeting. So from the get-go, I audio recorded everything as well as took notes. And then in the second phase, I also did video recordings. And what I do is record all of these, and then every single night I'd make notes. So I had two computers, one that I air gap, meaning it's a computer that's never been exposed to the internet. And I'd airdrop stuff from my camera. I'd download stuff on my camera onto my two external hard drives as well as the computer, because I needed three areas of safety. So what two external hard drives that had a lock-in pad, because of part of the ethics of how I'm conducting the data, as well as the computer. So essentially, year one, it's the master's equivalent, research, as well as getting your upgrade. Year two, you start collecting your data. You're immersed in practice, and you're spending quite a lot of time on site, and collecting data. Then in my year three, which is 2017, unfortunately, like I experienced a personal trauma that started in November 2016, which rendered me partially unable to do quite a lot of stuff, as I've spoken about, but not in detail. But I got hospitalized, was on medication, which made me a bit lethargic when I was doing work. So 2017, I took a gap year unofficially. Don't tell my supervisors. You're the first to know. And I decided to travel. I was still doing the PhD for all intents and purposes. However, I did it all over the world. Hey, the 10 countries I traveled to that I can remember off the top of my mind were Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, China. What else? Egypt, Ethiopia. I remember writing, oh my gosh, this was the worst. I had a deadline whilst I was in Ethiopia, and I wanted to go to Lalibela, and I couldn't because I had this submission to do. I was like, this bloody PhD. And it's like, yeah, you couldn't be here if you weren't doing the PhD because they were giving me a living stipend. So then I traveled to there as well, went to Italy, Bulgaria, learned how to ski in 2017, and Kuwait, and South Africa, but South Africa doesn't count. Yeah. So I traveled 2017, which, to be honest, was a good way of doing the PhD, because what happens after first year is you can be based anywhere in the world. You don't have to be based in the UK. You also don't have to be based where your university is. You have to collect data, yes, but then where you write the PhD, nobody cares. As long as once a month you meet with your supervisor and submit work to your supervisor, it's all good in the hood. So I spent 2017 being a strat mate or gallivanting. I traveled, mate. And it's not the conventional way to do the PhD, because so I'll tell you how I did it, but I'll also tell you how people that finished on time did it, because I think that's the responsible thing to do, like paying your TV license. Sorry, that's a South African thing. Okay, don't drink and drive. That's also the right thing to do, and it's illegal to drive over the limit. I digress. Let me come back. Okay, the computer's bringing me back. It's like, focus. Okay, I'm focused. So I traveled in 2017 to nurse myself back to health, but also to give myself the opportunity to explore different parts of the world and self. Um, I would advocate for this. I would recommend that you put in time for travel whilst doing your PhD, because it allows you to see the world from a different perspective. Oh, I also went to America. I went to a conference, the Academy of Management conference that happens annually. It used to be just in the United States, but now I think they're moving it around the world. and I was supposed to go to Estonia. I think that was 2020, no, 18. No, I ended up not going because they did come a point in time where the PhD was now like final, push, and traveling was just not possible. Because the thing about traveling is it allows your mind to get refreshed, but it also disrupts your routine. And I'll talk about that when I speak about the micro elements of how to do the PhD. I'm still on like the macro aspect of things, like the big things. And then, yeah, so 2017, I traveled. And then 2018, I was like, baby girl, this is the year when you're supposed to finish. Let's focus. So I stopped my traveling. I stopped my gallivanting. I turned down a trip to Pakistan. I still regret this, Uma. I'm so sorry. I turned down a trip to India. I turned down a trip to America. And these were supposed to be like partly travel for leisure, but also partly travel for consulting. In 2018, I became an extremely restricted recluse. I went off WhatsApp. I went off Instagram. I went off Facebook, and I became a homebody and a library buddy. So my world moved from being everywhere and anywhere to being the library, my flat on campus, and my office on campus. Literally, I would do so. I did the pink triangle when I was in India. And then when I was doing the final lap of the PhD 2018, 2019, I kept it at a triangle. I was either at Bluebell, which is a res hall on campus, or I was in the office, or I was at the library, Wharton Whaler specifically, or the study, the common room for PhD studies on campus. And the reason for this is when I did my master's, I lived on campus. When I did my PhD, I knew when I started the PhD, I lived on campus, moved off campus because of my partner, and then moved back on campus because I work based in the environment that is designed for work. So yeah, went back, lived on campus, and how I then was able to do in about 18 months what I should have had 3 years to do essentially was by being extremely prudent with my time, prudent with my presence with others, and extremely prudent with my location. So I'm a night owl, and this is moving now more micro. And how I did my PhD when I was coming now to the final part of finishing the PhD was I almost had to become extremely militant about every single thing that I do. I had packed lunches, I had packed breakfast. So I ate the same meal every day for about 18 months. So I knew that it was oats with some milk and blueberries, and then it would have like a little snack like a yogurt and a fruit. And on a Sunday I'd put it all out, and I know Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I'd have the vitamins to accompany it, and the bottle of juices and the bottles of water. And at lunch I'd eat the same kind of food. Like I minimized the decisions that I had to make so that I could focus and heighten my level of like just intention on being present in the PhD. I stopped attending parties, didn't attend funerals, didn't attend weddings, because how I was going to complete this was being 100% a student 100% of the time. And at some point in time, I think it got a bit too much because I started getting sick. I got hives. I had to run multiple blood tests. I ended up in casualty twice because I had hives that were so bad that they were all over my body, but even in my actual throat, and I couldn't breathe. So I had to be rushed to, we call it A&E here, but it's casualty in South Africa. And I got like an asthma pump, and then the doctor explained what was wrong with me, but also I got to see a blood specialist, Dr. Jonathan. At a specialist unit in Birmingham. And the reason I remember his name, because how I was doing the PhD was not going to be sustainable. And he basically said to me, you know what, Lali, there's nothing wrong with your body. What your body is basically doing is saying, you know what, you don't know how to regulate how much you can do. So when that happens, I'm going to offset alarms. There's just going to be smoke, and you're going to have to leave the building, allow me to recalibrate, and then come back into the building. So you have to relax. You have to include rest in your time. So I had to make some course correction when I was doing the final lap of the PhD and how I take care of myself. So let me describe a typical day of doing the PhD at the start of the PhD when I'm collecting data and then at the end of the PhD because it is like a curve, it's not all the same or it's like a life cycle. So when I was doing my first year, a typical day would start at about 9 o'clock. I dreaded this. I dreaded this shame because I'm not a morning person. And my classmates knew I wasn't a morning person. I was living on campus, ne? But I was always the last person to get to class. And they were like, "You live on campus. What's your problem?" Like, why is this class at 9 o'clock? I hated it. And yeah, it was what it was, guys. Yo, guys, can we stop having classes in the morning? Like, why must class start at 9? Anyway, so 9 o'clock you get in, first 2 hours you've got class, you get a break, then next 2 hours you've got a class, and then you're free for the afternoon. Tuesday, typically you wouldn't have a class. Wednesday, you've got class again. 9 o'clock, you start, or sometimes it could be an afternoon class, and sometimes we'd also have evening classes because what happens is each department has got classes and modules that it has for us as PhD students. But at Warwick, there was also an entire department dedicated to postgraduates that would do different things. So they do lunchtime things where you'd come and basically learn how to do a literature review, like the generic PhD things. So I did all of those. Of course, Lali was like, "Guys, I'm gonna learn as much as I can," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna start a program like this in South Africa." Guys, I miss a version of myself. I'm working to find her again. There was a version of me that I think I lost during the PhD process. And she was a very tenacious, very excited, very inspired, very ambitious and confident person. And a part of her is back. A big part of her is back because of like therapy, medication, and exercise and all sorts. But I remember like I'd attend sessions and not like be there because I'm there. I constantly thought to myself, how can I take notes so that somebody else can come and do this PhD with a lot more ease than what I'm experiencing? But I was so adamant that as soon as I finish, I'm going back to South Africa. And all these resources that I got at Warwick, I'm going to have them in South Africa as well. Because the one thing that, like, I felt a bit jealous of and a bit frustrated by was just how well resourced these universities are. Oh, and what money looks like when it's poured into you as an individual. I mean, thinking back now, my PhD easily cost about 6 million rands. And this is like not taking everything into account and also taking the fact that my host organization would pay for my accommodation and like my life, not my livelihood, but they basically cater for me when I'm in South Africa. I mean, I paid for my own like my life was so subsidized whilst I was doing the PhD because I was actually talking to a friend of mine today that I lived with during the PhD period when I was in South Africa. And she allowed me to stay in her apartment for free because it was like 10, 15 minutes away from where I was collecting data. So I had so much favor and subsidies that I'm blessed. I'm really blessed. And sorry, man. I don't take this PhD for granted. And I think when I think about how challenging it was, I'm looking out of the window because I don't like seeing myself cry. I know how much I cried during the PhD, and I've got some horrible videos. Yo, guys, season 2 of this podcast um we'll be delving into this how, because I kept a vlog, and it wasn't a vlog, it was just me. It was a video diary, and I kept a journal. And I think it would be remiss of me not to share some of these experiences because it was horrible. H in how is horrible. And not horrible, I wouldn't do it, but horrible, it tested my faith, it tested my body, it tested my mind, it tested my, oh, Jay, like, it tested me. It tested my relationships. And not just like romantic relationships, like even friendships and family. There's some strained relationships that I still can't fix because of how I chose to do the PhD, choosing to do it abroad, choosing to go off WhatsApp. There's people that can't forgive me for having decided to go off WhatsApp. And I understand, completely understand, because sometimes when you set boundaries and your walls are too high for people to access you, it communicates something, right? And even though that's not what you're intending to communicate, it communicates something. So, how I did the PhD in first year, I'd attend classes most of the time. And then in between classes, we had, on Wednesdays, we'd have like lunchtime get togethers at the PhD office. And this would be an opportunity for us to just talk about how we're doing, what we're up to. But there were also like a brown bag series where you talk about how your PhD is going, where you are. So that's what a typical week would look like. It's attending classes, and then what I would do is from 5 o'clock up until late, I'd do my assignments and also reviewing my notes because I'm a night owl. So I'd go to class and then go to the library or work from my office. And then second year, it wasn't classes anymore. So what I'd do is I'd go into the field. So I'd typically wake up in the morning, and just like a working person, I'd get to the office, usually at like 8 o'clock. Like when you're collecting data, the luxury of being a night owl doesn't exist because you must arrive before everybody and leave when everybody has left so that you can see like what the fullness of a day looks like for the research participant. So I would job shadow people. So I'd get to the office. I had a schedule of who I'm job shadowing when, and I'd spend a day with that person, interview the person, attend all their meetings. I remember this one person. Hey, it's rough in the data collection streets, guys. I'm there and I'm supposed to observe them for the day. I get to their office, they're not at their office, and then when they do arrive, they say, "I don't want you to watch this meeting." Okay, cool. So I go and I sit in the corridor. Then they're going off to lunch, and then I want to join them for lunch. He's like, "I don't want you joining me for lunch because it's a personal conversation." Okay, so I sit at the corridor during lunch. He comes back and he's like, "This meeting you can't listen to because it's like high security, what." Okay, so I don't listen to that. And then like the day comes to an end and I've observed him being unobservable. Ah, I remember thinking, okay, baby girl. So being a PhD student is sitting in the corridor and making small talk with this person's PA. And shame, once I got to know them really well, I understood why they were very apprehensive to me observing what they were doing. But I found my way into their heart, and I eventually did get to observe them. And they became one of the people that loved being in front of my camera. I'd always say, this part of the room, like this part of the room, you can sit so that we don't see you. Front and center. Umuntu is now in my videos because you build rapport, you also build the person's trust and respect, and then you gain access once that has been developed. So that's what the second year looks like. You're basically in the field. Whatever it is that your participant is doing, you do as well. I also got to stay in 5-star hotels. Yes, queens. I mean, some people got to spend PhDs in yachts, okay? Some people got to spend their PhDs attending lavish weddings. So for all intents and purposes, this was a soft life PhD. When it got to data collection, I stayed in 5-star hotels because my participants were doing away strategy meetings. And I remember I used to do like little starfishes. For those of you listening, I'm actually waving my hands, and I do little starfishes. And it allowed me to see what the upper echelons in organizations do when they travel. It was beautiful. I remember getting picked up at the airport, dropped off at my hotel, and things like that. Yeah, it was the good life. Like during that time, I was like, Lali, you have arrived. But I wouldn't be sleeping in those beds because half the time I was like dumping the data at night and you can't sleep until you've done it. Doing your observation notes before you sleep because you'll forget tomorrow. Checking what the agenda looks like, but also going to the bar and spending time with them. I know the hard life, going to the bar and listening to people talk about what they do. Because part of my research method advocates for us watching people in their work time and their downtime, because the downtime actually tells us a lot about what informs the strategy. And in my final findings, I called this peripheral strategizing. So things that happen prior to the meeting that actually impact the outcome of the strategy. And this is like pre-meeting talk that would happen before the meeting and during lunch. And then even like the conversations that would happen at the bar actually influenced the outcome of the strategic engagements. So that's what I did in the second year. Then third year, I said I went AWOL. I was a strat mate. And then the fourth year, I was writing. The writing part was grueling, shame. All I did during this time was wake up at about 11, eat, shower, and then listen to gospel music. I couldn't like read anything. I couldn't read the Bible. I couldn't read anything because I was reading a lot of literature. Like I've still got a whole storage of like the papers that I printed, and I don't know what to do with them because I need to start writing articles. So a part of me is like, you're gonna read these again. Another part of me wanted to convert them into like beautiful artwork, and another part of me wanted to just burn everything because I was so upset whilst reading them. But I'm actually going this afternoon to empty part of the storage because I need to get rid of some of the things. And yes, I will start writing. It's the last quarter of the year, and I usually dedicate this part of the year to writing. So all my teaching's done for the year, and I'm gonna go back to the routine of how I was a PhD scholar. So I'm actually getting a library card, and today I'm gonna go to Warwick and just like re-immerse myself in that world. What I find is living in the UK now, Warwick is almost like my home. So I try at least once a month to go to Warwick, whether it's to walk on campus, spend the day there, have lunch with an old friend. But it almost like centers me in the same way like visiting your grandmother's house or a friend's home. I mean, your parents' home does. I find it to be quite a comforting space. I don't know if it's like a trauma bond. You psychologists can tell me, but yeah, I do find it extremely relaxing to go back to Warwick campus. And also, it's changed so much since I've left. So it's also like a reminder, Yoguti, this too has passed, and you're a new person. You know, you've graduated, you've finished. So how I did my PhD in the third year was I didn't really. And then in the fourth year, wake up at 11, eat, and then I'd aim Muguti by 1, latest 2 o'clock, I'm at the office or at the library. And then by 3 o'clock, I'm working. So from 3 to about 6 would be like my first round of work, pause for like dinner. My partner at the time used to bring me dinner, like I said. Then we'd eat together, either at the library or I'd go home and eat. And home was like, I make it sound so dramatic. I'd go like from one part of campus to another part of campus. Home. And then I'd go back to the library, usually at about 9 p.m. And then I'd stay from 9 until 3 a.m. and then walk back to res, sleep. And then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, wake up and start it again. And this was my happiest time because like you just get to focus ebusuku, you just get to push, you just get to do your studies. And I used to listen to like different, like there's a 3-hour bossa nova track that I'd listen to at one like stint, and then there's 2 Abdullah Ibrahim concerts, and then there's a Black Coffee concert that I listened to. And I know that if I've gotten through all of that, I've essentially covered the day's work. So I work well with music. And something that I discovered post the PhD, which I think would have been beneficial, is something called Focus Mate. It's this online platform where you can go and find somebody else that's also working virtually, and then you two become each other's accountability partners for an hour, for 50 minutes or 25 minutes. I had an actual accountability partner. She was doing her PhD as well. She was 1 year behind me, and we used to basically meet up and either study in the same vicinity and just like keep in touch whilst we're studying. I found like talking to somebody about what I'm doing was helpful in keeping me accountable as well as motivated. So that was like the fourth year of the PhD up until the sixth year typically. And the reason why I say the sixth year is I finished my PhD in 4.5 years, like the actual thesis, right? I had a 6 month extension to edit my thesis, submitted it for examination, and I submitted it in April 2019 as opposed to September 2018. And was it April? Yeah, April 2019. And then after submitting it, I had April, May, June, July to prepare for my Viva. Then I went to Scotland at an EGOS conference because that's where my examiners could be at the same time. So I did my Viva in Scotland. This is unprecedented. Normally, you do it at your university. Passed my Viva, had major corrections. They gave me 6 months to do the corrections. So that's why it then takes 6 years. It's that extra time between April and July, and then that extra time between July, and then doing my corrections, and then submitted my thesis again, and then it got marked, and then I graduated in 2019. And the time when I was doing the corrections was that like wake up at 11 up until 3 type vibe. And yeah, that became my life for a good 2 years. And then I finished. And yeah, after I finished, I slept. I was like out for 2 weeks. And yeah, my partner at the time was a bit worried. He was like, I thought we're getting a job, you know, maybe we're gonna start helping around. And I was just like, homie, I'm gonna relax. And yeah, I got to the point where I was like broke and I just needed to start working. And then I unfortunately did the most. I started working for the United Nations, and I started up my production company again. And I was working 7 different jobs at a time. At the same time, doing Najathon, doing work with the FAO, doing consulting and lecturing and everything. I went from 0 to like 100 again. And then I think I realized it's not like sustainable, but it was necessary. And then COVID was also happening. And I did the final, did I do my corrections during COVID? I can't remember. It gets blurry. But yeah, I finished the PhD. And when we had lockdown, people were like, oh my goodness, this is so difficult. And the transition into the lockdown wasn't that difficult for me because what lockdown was is what my last 2 years of the PhD were. I was always at home. I was always in front of my computer, and I was always working remotely, essentially. Um, yeah, so that's that. So tips for how to do the PhD from somebody that took much longer than what she should have. Based on what my other colleagues did is there's one colleague that really did the PhD, I think, the right way. When I like started this, I wanted to be like, there's no right way. There is an efficient way. There is a lean way of doing the PhD. And I would say that it consists of developing a routine, number one. So knowing I start my day, like treating the PhD like a job. And this person had good mental health. They finished their PhD on time. They were able to publish whilst doing the PhD because part of this riff-raff of being pity things meant that I didn't get to publish any articles during my PhD, which is a disappointment for myself because I would have liked to. And it's now an expectation when you're doing the PhD that you do the PhD. And how I also did the PhD, for those who would know, there's 2 tracks. One is you can choose the publication route where you write 3 to 4 to 5 articles about a theme. And then this collectively becomes a thesis that you then pull together for your PhD submission. Another one is doing the monograph where you write a book essentially, and it's got like introduction, literature review, method, data analysis, discussion, theory, conclusion. It's 3 to 6 to 7 to 12 chapters some people do, and that's like the other option. I chose the monograph because that's what my supervisors were comfortable with, and now I would recommend that people do the 5-paper route because you can't get a job in academia without publishing unless you are graced by God, like I am, because I work in academia and I haven't published an individual article yet, but I know that some universities wouldn't accept you. But I guess Gibbs is unique in that it appreciates practice as well as theory, but also I think I offer something unique. And there are universities in the UK that can hire you without publications. I actually stand to be corrected because as of 2020 or 2021, there's a teacher fellowship, there's a teaching fellowship route, so you can go the associate professor route or teaching fellow route. Um, you can go the academic. I mean, they're all academic. There's terms for this, but you can go the I want to be a research fellow route. So you teach as a minimum, and you publish as like your main thing, or you can be a teaching fellow where you teach, and that's how you get to become a full professor by your teaching hours and contribution to the community. So, I'm on the research fellow track at Gibbs. I'm trying to get on the teaching track so that I can be an associate professor, but they don't allow it. So yeah, I'm gonna be publishing and focusing on that because it's the good and the right thing to do. No, but also I want to see my name. You know, I want to see my name quoted in other people's studies, and I want to share what my studies were about. So I do think it's important to publish. I know I'm very sarcastic about it, but it is an important part of you know, being a scholar, and it's also how we pass on the baton to others, because somewhere out there someone wants to do a similar study to me but they don't have access to my thesis because my thesis was embargoed. And the reason for this is because I used video data, um, and all of those things. Part of my contract with my participants was I'm not going to do anything that's going to harm you or expose you, or allow for people to know who you are. So nobody has read my thesis outside of my committee, my supervisors, as well as I believe the legal representative from my organization and the head of department that accepted me into their team. Outside of that, nobody's read the thesis and it's embargoed for 5 years. And the reason we embargo the thesis for 5 years is some of the people that were working in the organization have left. The strategic matter that I was discussing has now shifted. So if someone picks it up and is like, what is the secret recipe? The recipe has evolved after 5 years. Because remember, it's technically 10 years now. Because, oh, goodness. Because I've collected my data and the 5 years starts after I get my PhD conferred, you know. So it's now 2019, 2019, 2021, 22. So there's 2 more years still to go. So I'm gonna start writing my papers now so that they can get published in that time, because it takes like 2 to 4 years to get a paper published, if I'm not mistaken, in like top tier journals. From my understanding, I am yet to discover this, and this is what like season 2, I think, of the podcast is going to be. Like how to get to associate professorship. Yay! I just made that up as a goal right now. Now because it's recorded, I'm gonna live up to it. But I do want to become full professor. I want to become associate professor first within the next 5 years, and then become a full professor within the 5 years before that. But I want to be professor before I turn 50. I'm in no rush. Like I'm still enjoying the doctor, you know. Yeah. So that's how to do a PhD. But essentially, there's books about it. There's I'm looking at the back because there's books literally on how to write a thesis, authoring a PhD. There's also books on how to the research and the first steps. There's books on how to edit and things like that. But yeah, there's all of this. And if you want me to go into greater detail, which I think I will in the second season, I think the second season will focus on the how, you know, like how do you apply? How do you, you know, tackle coursework? How do you do all sorts of things? How do you balance the teaching and the consulting? Because it's a lot. It's a lot. I was asked yesterday by a potential client, when do you sleep? And I was like, good question. No, but I do sleep shame. I work hard and I play hard now. How I live my life now, like I've got very busy seasons and then I've got like kikelezing seasons where I'm like 2 weeks in the Eastern Cape doing nothing. Yeah, so now 2022 was the year where I really like tried to recalibrate everything. I didn't take as much work commitments as I did. My consulting hours were much lower than like the year before. And next year, I'm trying to build routine again. So I'm hoping to work 4 days a week, 2 days on academic stuff, 2 days on consulting, and then 1 day on creative stuff. This is how this year has been essentially, but in blocks as opposed to like the week. And yeah, next year I want to start plateauing so that I can allow myself to recalibrate even further, and then build time into my schedule to start writing on a daily basis. Because everybody I've spoken to says, you know, I'd write as a routine. So I was saying, Guti, the right way to do the PhD if you were to do the lean approach. Have a routine, treat it like a job, start at a certain time, finish at a certain time, and then rest. The thing that I didn't do right in how I did my PhD is I only learned later the importance of doing things like swimming, playing golf, doing kickboxing, taking walks. I would say that how hard you work is as important as how hard you rest. And for me, I think if I could go back, I would keep the Sabbath free and not do any work because I did work on Sundays as well. I would also like feel extremely guilty if I went to any social gathering like a birthday or anything like that. That's not healthy. And also, whilst you're doing the PhD, we are entitled to 6 weeks of leave. And I didn't take leave. Well, I took a year's leave in 2017, but then the rest I didn't take leave, and I should have because people that did really well in the PhD used to go on holidays, you know, and they take leave and they take Christmas off. I just work. Um, so yeah, the healthy way to do it is to create a schedule for yourself, treat it like you do a job, timetable what you do, and then have a start and finish time because that allows your brain to know, okay, I'm going to be stretched for this amount of time and then I'm going to flex for this amount of time, which gives you resilience as well as like capabilities. The capacity to continue. One of the best books that I'd recommend is How to Do Your PhD in 15 Minutes. And basically, it recommends that even if you don't do a lot, every day do at least 15 minutes of work on your PhD. And what this does is it allows for you to anchor yourself in something related to the PhD so that when you leave, your brain continues working. Because most of the things that I did during my PhD, I got the ideas in the shower or whilst taking a walk or whilst talking to a friend. It wasn't sitting at the library. The solutions to all my PhD findings and problems were not when I was actually like, I am doing serious PhD work. Look at me focus. No, it was when I was not being intentional. And that's why, like, when you do the PhD, it's important to keep notes on your phone. I've got like voice notes, I've got written notes as well. And I kept a notebook where I'd be like, oh, let me brain dump. And also doing morning pages. So waking up in the morning and journaling 3 pages is also something that I'd highly recommend when doing the PhD, because that's how you keep store of like ideas that you're generating, but also how you can develop a way of like thinking about your thesis, so that you can work on the thesis. When you've scheduled the time to do so. So that's how I did my PhD. It sounds a bit all over the place, but that's how my PhD was. It was a very loosely structured process. I don't want to say chaotic because that would make me sound like I'm not professional, and I'm very professional, as you can see. But yeah, it was a very loosely structured PhD. Given a second chance, I'd give myself a lot more structure from the get go. And also, I would not have come and started the PhD in a relationship. I think it can work and it did work for some people on the program. But what I noted is the people that were single on the program did really well. And the people that had very supportive partners on the program did really well. Those of us that came into the program with the relationship and ended it, it caused some havoc because it takes time to recover. But it's normal. It happens, you know. But I'd just say try to make sure that whatever it is that you enter the PhD as, you sustain it throughout so that you don't cause yourself unnecessary disruption. So that's me, Dr. Nobulali, Dr. Nobulali Tangazere, talking about how to do the PhD. Yes, this is now technically the last episode that I'm recording for the 5 Ws and the H. But as you'll see, there's a bonus track that looks at like life post the PhD, and I recorded this prior to actually doing this episode. So I came back from South Africa like on the 11th of October. It is now the 2nd of November, and I'm recording this now. But if you've come to this episode and you've listened to all of them, or if this is the first episode you're listening to, thank you so much for taking this time out to listen to me and being a part of my dream come true. It means that the day I took on, I actually executed on and finished. The question is, will I publish? Because all my episodes are recorded. And now the question is, how do I go and take this forward? The idea that I'm toying with is taking some of the insights that I've learned and converting them into a book. And then like coming up maybe with like a week's long, like something that would allow for people to access the skills that I've gained from doing the PhD. I also would love to do a second season. And in the second season, I think I would show you some of the raw footage that I have, some of how, like, my working practices, like, how do you actually do a literature review? How do you write the thesis? How do you work with an editor, like going into my emails and showing you this is what I'd send, this is what it would look like, and this is what an edited version looks like. Because I think, like, the front stage of the PhD looks really lovely, but we need to see the backstage as well. Like, what does it take to get onto that stage and graduate and have that title? So I think if I can cast my eyes into the future, second season would look like first season, me talking about graduation, because that's like lit, or like that would be the last episode because I've had my graduation. So it would be something about the graduation, and then a video diary tracking the genesis of the PhD, looking at photos, videos, and which I think would be, it would be like a walk down memory lane of the PhD and just looking at what I know now and how I'd advise my younger version of self on how to do the PhD as a way of paving the way forward for those that follow and those that are inspired to do a PhD. So I can't remember what I did in the last episode, but I want to make sure that I close the season and say thank you very much. It has been my pleasure and privilege to do this. As you can see, it still brings a lot of emotions out because it's still fresh, it's still new, and it's a bittersweet experience doing the PhD. It is a life-changing experience. I earn more than what I would have as Miss Tangazele. I enter rooms that I wouldn't have entered. And some people say doing a PhD is like taking 4 years to gain 10 years worth of experience. I'd say yes, in that you learn quite a lot about yourself and learn a lot about how to generate knowledge and things like that, like in a short space of time. However, there are people that are earning much more than me that didn't do a PhD and stayed, in corporate for the years that it took me to do the PhD. So I don't know if that's the case. I'm not comparing myself to other people. I'm comparing myself to myself. And when I think about how much I earned when I started the PhD and how much I earn now, I earn much more than what I did. When I look at the impact that I have before doing the PhD and the impact that I have now, I have much more impact. When I look at how much favor I've got, the opportunities that come my way, I've got much more opportunities now that I have a PhD. So if you want an upgrade to what you do, if you want to explore an area of research that you're truly inquisitive about, but also if you want the title or if you want the opportunity to learn. Because I was saying to someone, different people do the PhD for different reasons. Some do it because they want the title, some want the accolade, some want the knowledge, some want the network, some want the theory, some want the experience. Different people want different things. And based on that, there's different ways of attaining that. If you really just want the title, don't make the topic super complicated. If you really want to be exposed to good ways of doing research, join a research group rather than doing like your own independent way, because you're going to become an apprentice and you'll see how somebody else does it. So there's different ways to do it. And how I did it was really to immerse myself in a new world, expose myself to new knowledge, and come out having developed something new, which I did. I've got a new theoretical framework. I've contributed to the field of strategy as practice, but also I'm now going to convert it into a course, hopefully convert it into a book, and then also write articles from it. And I consult based on what I learned. I do consultations as a video ethnographer using the same method that I used for my PhD. So it has been extremely beneficial to me. It's been like a game changer, especially because my undergrad was in dramatic arts. This really catapulted me into the world of business, into the world of social sciences, which was why I wanted to do the PhD as well from a professional perspective. So I'm happy with the outcome. I'm still licking the wounds, and I definitely recommend that if you want to do the PhD, do so. It's definitely worth it. I am on social media. On Twitter, I'm at Lali Tangazele, and on Instagram, I'm at Nobu_Lali. I hope to hear from you soon, and I look forward to seeing you in the second season of the 5 Ws and the H of doing a PhD, which is the current working title, and I'm sure it's going to change. But at this point in time, that's what it was. Thank you, and all the best. God bless. Bye bye.